So yeah, why don't we get started? So first of all, thank everybody here for participating. Obviously, Bryan, thank you. We appreciate your time. Thanks everyone who submitted questions. We've got about an hour until I probably get forcefully removed from the room that I'm in and have to shut down my machine. But Daniel and I have been doing these for a few weeks, and they've been very organic, and we decided to go for the air and try to broadcast a little bit more, and as a result, we have to limit the number of people that are kind of inside. So Daniel had the great idea of inviting one of the most influential people in our industry, Bryan, to kind of answer some questions and have it be a little bit more interview style. So so we'll let Bryan do maybe a quick intro. I think everyone here knows you, and probably everyone else watching knows you pretty well, but that'll be good. And then we can start to get into some of the questions that these guys have.
So thank you, Justin, so much, and Daniel for inviting me. If we get time during the call, I'll talk about my first experience with web analytics, which happened, way before most people would think about it. But in 1998, my brother and I founded an agency focused purely on improving conversion rates. Obviously, back then, no one cared about them. It was all about eyeballs and traffic and the new economy. But we realized how powerful web analytics was to help people get better results online, how to improve their conversion rates. Since then, we co-authored a number of best-selling, New York Times and Wall Street Journal best-selling books, Call to Action, Waiting for You to Cut the Bark, Always Be Testing. I was the founder and am now the chairman emeritus of the Web Analytics Association. I teach conversion optimization and marketing optimization at Market Motive. I've been a Clixy columnist for the last 11 years. So I keep busy.
Yeah, I'd say that's kind of busy. I think that flows real nicely into. I know Wilson, you had a question. I don't see Wilson on, but I think it's worth maybe starting with the question that he talked to us about, and it's kind of that intersection, right, of analytics and optimization, right? So how do you use analytics to find the weak points in a site, whether it's Google Analytics or some of the other tools out there? What are some of the tricks and techniques to use to find where to start that testing?
Yeah, I think it's such a critical part. I don't know if that's the intersection either. Let's start with that point. I actually believe the whole premise of analytics is to generate to-do lists, right? In other words, you're not doing analytics unless you're generating to-do actions, and you've got to get stuff done. And we'll talk about why it's even more important today than it was even 5 years ago. I think it's certainly changed a lot. And the typical way that most analysts, look at the vast amount of data that we get, and they try to see if there's anything that's that stands out to them as something where there's an error or there's a problem, or a lot of people are exiting this page. And I actually usually like to start from the exact opposite angle. A big part of what we do is all about focusing in on personas, and obviously personas is all about segmentation. And any analytics is all about segmentation and then personalization, as I like to call it later on. But the key to this is real simple. I'd rather look for cohort groups that are successful, right, and look for the bright spots in the analytics and say, okay, look, what, we're finding this particular segment who's coming in, let's say, from this particular group of keywords, they seem to be converting at a much higher rate than anybody else. And if that's the case, what is it that they're doing? What is the messages that they're seeing that may be different than other groups are doing that are not converting as well? And using that as a leverage point to start the optimization process. And so instead of looking for, again, the shining light in all the tea leaves, I'd rather start on the bright spot and then focus on where the weak points are.
And so when you do that segmentation, is it keyword-based, campaign-based? What are some of the attributes that you look for, I guess?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously there are a bunch of different things. We'll just go down the list of everything from some basic stuff. We'll look at the different channels, right? Is their PPC channel more effective than their organic search? Is it more effective, their broad match versus their whatever it is? And then we'll start looking new visitor versus repeat visitor. I'll especially start doing that when I'm looking at shopping cart analysis. That's a real critical one because I'm looking if we're dealing with trust and confidence issues versus other organic issues that may be appearing. We'll look at geography, right? Maybe it's sticker shock. Is it time of day? We'll start looking at all different parameters, and hopefully we've gotten some feedback also from their customer service people, their sales people, their marketing people, as to some of the things that they feel might be things that differentiate their customers. And that will guide us to start looking in the analytics as to what might be something that might shine that bright spot on for us.
And Elvin, I think your question is quite applicable. I don't know if you maybe want to jump in.
Yeah, my question is about optimizing, for example, an e-commerce site, and if you're going to do some implementation on an e-commerce site that isn't out of the box, what did you do? What did you try to measure? Did you try to measure add to cart? Did you try to measure form field errors, or what did you do?
I mean, so I think there's a bunch of things that I would be looking at. Certainly one of the things you want to look at is all the different searches people are doing, especially the failed searches. What's coming up, and why those aren't converting. I think that's an important one. You obviously want to look at all the the traditional stuff, the bounce rates, the conversion rates. But I think my most important metric whenever I'm thinking about retailers and from a merchandising perspective is the look-to-book ratios, right? How many people looked at a particular product or category and actually completed a purchase of it? Because those metrics will give you a lot of information, right? If you have products that have high visits with a high conversion rate, leave them alone. Don't touch anything. You're doing okay. If you've got visits with a high, with high visits and low conversion rates, obviously, people are interested in the product, but there's something going on in the product, either in the description, in the price, and whatever the offer is, that's not making them buy the product. Obviously, if it's low visits and a low conversion rate, you may want to consider dropping the product, right? Maybe it's just or trying to expose it some more and seeing if people have interest. If they don't have an interest, you get rid of it quickly. And then if it has low visits but a high conversion rate, then you want to try to figure out if you can bundle those things with some of the more popular items to see if you can start getting, obviously, a lot more happening. So I think look-to-books are probably, my most actionable metric whenever I'm trying to work with an e-commerce site. And that isn't coming out of the box, unfortunately.
That's an awesome one, the look-to-book, and something I hadn't thought of before, and I could see how it could take a little bit of work, right? Especially large retailer, man, there might be hundreds of products, thousands of SKUs.
Well, with everything, you start with that 80-20 rule, right? You start splitting up. You go, to the top products that are doing it. You go to that next group. You go to the next group. You can't do all of it all at once, unfortunately. Easier way out of and it really isn't complicated, but it's just not presented that way, and it just should be one of those standard reports if you're an e-commerce site.
Yeah, can I jump in here? Recently, Google Analytics actually increased the amount of characters that you can pass in a custom variable, and I've had great success in actually capturing item IDs. And you can just put like a separator in there, and and then you can pull that information back out either via a CSV or an API. And I've been able to have some great reporting. You can segment custom variables against transactions, for example. So there's a huge amount of actionable stuff there. So that look-to-book ratio, how many people viewed an item versus bought, what items were bought together. It's really very powerful. So perhaps you are limited by the 128 characters, but it's that 80-20 rule. So it's worked really well for us.
Yeah, no, and if you do that and then you tie in what I tweeted out this week, and I know Justin, you found it also interesting as well, being able to do cohort analysis by being able to say, is this a new customer, a repeat customer, pulling that in and doing the look to book by the new customer, repeat customer, other cohorts. All of a sudden, the level of insight is that much greater.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are. I mean, I know people have been doing cohort analysis for a while, and I think it's we've had this in analytics in general, right? There's this group that's doing all of the really cool stuff like the cohorts, and then we've got everybody else. And I think we're starting to push cohorts deeper down the line now. At least it feels that way.
Yeah, no, I think people have gotten through the day again with added fragmentation of the media in general. People realizing we're dealing with so many different groups of people that if we don't start figuring out how to group them into more efficient buckets, we're just not going to get any insight out of the data anyway. You can't look at all this massive amount of data and bucket everybody into the same bucket. And so the cohort analysis is something that really gives you an added edge. And I think the market is definitely for those who are doing the leading things, they're definitely leading much further. But we're starting to see that that middle group kind of edge up into some of these techniques as well.
So what are some of your methods for creating these buckets, considering the limitations of a lot of, I think about Google Analytics as very session-based as opposed to pan-session analysis. When you're talking about look-to-book, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, somebody might go look a couple other places and then come back and buy. So that human experience in terms of interacting with the website, which is definitely pan-session, people coming back multiple times,
correct,
in that purchase. Just curious about your thoughts about how to create those buckets in that sort of web analytics environment, and how you view that look-to-book metric, which you find so powerful within that context.
Yeah, it's not one of the easier things to do. That's for sure not. And depending on the complexity of your sale, that's why you have to make sure that the solution you're using can give you that level of insight. And that's why a lot of the more complex sales are using tools that'll bucket more cross-session stuff like that. So you definitely have to keep that in mind. But even on your average typical e-commerce site, there was a study done a number of years ago by the McAfee folks, the ones who originally created the HackerSafe logo. And they found that from initial touch to conversion was like on average 36 hours. So and that did cross. So from a technological point of view, right now using Google Analytics, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Maybe we'll see something in the future that'll make it a little bit easier for people.
Hint, hint, Justin, hint, hint.
I'll pass. I'll let one of the other ninjas take that. I'm trying to figure out how to get not provided keywords. So Yoshua, you also talked about you had a great question about the conversions per impression. Bryan, I know you talked about conversions per impression. I thought that would be a great question.
Yeah, what's interesting is first thing when my brother and I left our agency, almost all the clients that reached out to us all were saying, can you come help us with some our pay-per-click problems? They were definitely feeling some of the pains, and there was a number of reasons why. I mean, there was a couple things that Google had done. They had just released the modified broad match just shortly after that. So there was definitely something going on with those matches that was a little bit of a concern for people. People weren't getting the return that they were. And so, we spent a lot of time, doing analysis into pay-per-click campaigns, much more so than we used to when we were focused on just conversion rates. We always knew that it was a big driver, but it wasn't a primary focus. And I think one of the things that a lot of people, take for granted is the power of a good ad to help increase conversion rates. Given the same, I don't know if Austin they have the same techie, technical word I used is sucky for landing pages I used to use in Brooklyn. I'll have to find out. I haven't gotten the Austin lingo going yet. Same sucky landing page, a better ad, and if you focus on conversion per impression, in other words, and I like the impression metrics because obviously, that gives you a little bit of that balance in case people are concerned about, branding. And we've definitely been involved in with some agencies, with clients who, we want all those impressions because they matter to branding, but the client also is very concerned about the sales side. So using this, blended metric of conversions per impression really just hits home. It says, look, yeah, you may be getting all these impressions, but we should be seeing conversions on the back end from it. And it really is, a much more powerful thing because someone may see one of your pay-per-click ads and not click through to it. They may eventually turn it into an organic search. And so you have to assume that impression hopefully contributed at some point. Again, all these multi-touch points. I think it was Daniel who shared that great image today, right, of all those different touch points. So yeah, I mean, this is hard. This is hard to do. So
when you're talking about conversions to impressions, you're talking about all site conversions to impressions in addition to just through the PPC channel? Because something like I mentioned is concerned about is I see in a lot of PPC campaigns just impression spamming. Just so many impressions on Bryan Match, and they'll be like, you'll have like a steady for a while, and then all of a sudden the algo will go bam, and you'll just have a ton of impressions, and the search partners, it can get to be a mess with Bryan Match.
No, what we're doing it is for that ad group essentially, right? Because what we're saying is, look, if we can write an ad that gives you a much better conversion per impression than you're getting now, that's ultimately what you really want to get, is you want to get more sales from those ads. So even if the click-through rate either goes up or goes down, is not necessarily the best metric if you're just trying to get your sales revenue up, right? I mean, obviously, you don't want to kill your click-through rate because that will affect your quality score, which will affect your cost per click. It's really just focused in on that one part. But I agree, there are way too many people who are impression spamming as well. We want to avoid that.
Bryan, you brought up a good a point there when you were talking about testing and something that I've kind of seen a little bit, and it had to do with testing for brand, measuring brand, brand lift, all of that great stuff. And I was wondering maybe if you could just talk a little bit about the measurement there, right? Because it starts to get a little flaky with conversion testing, right? Because conversion testing is so much about having a defined outcome, and with I think we've moved beyond time and we've moved beyond depth and things like that. So, are there some good substantial ways to measure brand change based on different creative or different types of campaigns?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think number one, I think the definition of brand is somewhat changing today, and I hope marketers would be a little more attuned to that. The whole concept of branding, this is obviously what we talked about in Waiting for Your Cat to Bark, is based on Pavlov's research of ring the bell, and the dogs associated the ringing to food coming. That's branding, right? There was the external trigger that elicited a response. And that's what marketers hope to do when they do some trigger. So the question is, okay, when there is a brand, what is the response that you're trying to achieve from your triggers? And the problem is when you ask most brand marketers what it is, they're like, recall. Okay, so how would you define recall? So one way to do it is, are they searching more for your brand? Are they searching for what you messaged? If they are, okay, maybe then I can agree that there's a better recall for it. And so I look for those more very tangible metrics, directly correlated to an action, as opposed to more airy, fairy, fluffy brand metrics. Even though I'm very much into brand marketing, it's very much about the customer experience. We were dealing with a client that their site obviously was doing such a good job with the brand experience that every 3 days, 70% of their client base returned to the website. And this is an e-commerce site. Okay, So that is a brand, right? When there's that level of dedication. So those are the kinds of metrics I really want to see as strong brand metrics. And I think, I think one of the first real arrows in the heart of brand marketers went out just a couple of weeks ago when we saw, the speech from the CEO of Procter & Gamble talking about how, and he laid off the 1,600, marketers that are essentially the brand marketers, and talked about, look, the fact that, they had this Old Spice campaign that generated all these free impressions, that's branding. That really generated a lot of activity and a lot of people going to view their thing. So going to view a video, right, and spending time on there, we can actually see how effective the brand is, as opposed to, great, I broadcast something on TV, I don't know whether you paid attention or not. And I think that's the beauty of things like YouTube today, and I think as we start seeing more of the digitization of media, we'll get a better sense of real branding happening.
Do we have to be concerned about So I agree. Do we have to worry about statistical significance, right? Do we have to start thinking about the heavier math, or the Old Spice guy obviously did a great job, and he millions and millions of impressions, but there's no statistical significance calculation. Do we have to freak out about that? I mean, we're waiting for Optimizer to show us bars and things.
Yes and no, right? I mean, I think it really depends on again what the goal is, right? And what you're trying to achieve. There are certain times where statistical significance really matters, but I always say the number one metric that matters the most, and the only one that you can measure 100% accurately, is dollars in the bank. Everything else, data is dirty. You're never going to get 100% significance. There's always going to be challenges with it. We know there's issues with cookies. There's going to be issues with the next technology. We're always going to see these things. So, stop over-obsessing about being, a data scientist. There are places to do that. We're in the business of commerce, of generating revenue. And ultimately, that's all that really matters. I know one of the other questions that had come in was all about, how long do you spend planning, for a test to run? And it comes right back to this, right? No, I'm not willing to let a test run endlessly till I get a statistical significance. If I don't see a real result over the, in the first week or two, the test is dead. Go try it again. Come up with other variations. Come up with another hypothesis. Because if you can't impact dollars quickly, you're obviously not doing something that matters enough to your customers.
Yeah, actually, I think, Bryan, you just answered the question that I had, and that was about the statistical significance. So for me, analytics essentially presents you with data, and the actionable part of what we're trying to do is, you come up with hypotheses, ideas to test. So the actionable part, very often, for me at least, is looking at testing, landing pages, and what have you. One of the challenges that I have, working with perhaps some smaller retailers, is the amount of time that it might require. And I actually think, from a sort of philosophical perspective, basically what you're saying is that you should agree on the length of time before you start the experiment. Tools like Google's Website Optimizer or Visual Website Optimizer, they do have these calculators, but I just don't like the idea of waiting for significance to sort of just let it run and, oh, maybe we'll just wait another day, maybe we'll hit significance. I think that's the wrong thing to do. And so I actually do agree with you on the need to be consistent and just say, hey, 10 days, perhaps that includes the weekend and the weekdays, but if we don't see anything, you have to move on. And I think that's the challenge that I see in the sort of process of testing, that you have to be rigorous and just move on and just keep testing. And but anyway, so I'm glad that that you agree. Not that you have to agree with me or vice versa, but I'm glad but other people think along the same line, basically.
Yeah, no, I think today, and I mentioned it, when we first started the Hangout, is that testing today needs to be about going faster. It needs to be about corporate agility and increasing your corporate metabolism. Things are evolving every single day, and the fact is there is something that you can test every single day in your marketing efforts, and that's what really your goal should be. Lots of little things very quickly come up to quick decisions, and then next, and then next. If you're waiting to find out, does the right shade of blue impact conversion 0.83%, it's just not worth it. It's just not. That's not what it is. You've got bigger problems. Maybe if you're at 90% conversion rate and you're trying to get up to 91 or 92, maybe it's worth waiting. But when the average website's still converting 2 and 3%, you have a lot bigger problems to waste time than waiting for to show significance when it really is not having that big of an impact.
And maybe I can ask one follow-up question. Again, this is perhaps more for the smaller retailer. And you mentioned low conversion rate, say 2%, and then couple that with perhaps low overall traffic. Right. Do you believe in the goal for an experiment to be perhaps item page views? So the look-to-book ratio, that is the goal. Or perhaps adding to cart before, so that you actually get, just more data to work with.
Well, so let's take it a step back. When I look at a conversion rate, there are two things that we talked about. You have to start from what is the driving point? Where is the traffic coming from? And so one of the reasons I like getting involved in pay-per-click and then focusing it on landing page to conversion, even for a small retailer, is, look, if I can impact the ad and rewrite the ad to affect what I call the conversion trinity, and I'll cover that in a moment, to then come back to the landing page and improve its conversion trinity, oftentimes I can get the lever of both sides, and I can see results much quicker because I've isolated my lab essentially into a very small slice. So I can very quickly see big impacts or zero impact, and I can get a lot of these done, right? And wait for the conversion events to happen. I can pick my top 5 ad groups that are really tight, tweak all of those going, and see much more impact. And if I did that every single month, you generate a lot more revenue for clients at the end of the day, even if they have small numbers. Okay, right? So let me answer what the conversion trinity is, because obviously that's the follow-up to what I just answered. So when Jeffrey and I, my brother, left our agency, I went back and I had a lot of time to digest and reflect, and all I spent time doing for a good 6 to 9 months is working with my students over at Market Motive, for their certification classes in conversion optimization. And one of my students, she went ahead and she presented one of the assignments I had in such a way that it triggered me thinking about this conversion trinity concept, which is every single test I've ever seen, and it came back to looking at pay-per-click ads as well. All the ones that are most effective, any major change happened because of a change to any one of the 3 elements or multiple elements of the conversion trinity. So the conversion trinity is real simple. The first part of it is it relevant? Right? Did I make the ad more relevant to my visitors? Did I make my landing page more relevant to my visitors? And relevant isn't just matching scent and matching the same trigger words and to the landing page. I think that's one piece of it. But are you really reaching and understanding their felt need? Okay. The second one was value, right? Are you expressing value both in the ad and in the landing page? And I think that's one of the pieces that, unfortunately, too many marketers skip over. They don't realize that value is, they know value is important, but when it comes to that 140-character ad word, somehow they forget to put in free shipping, or that they have 673 styles to search from. So that's the second one. The third one, excuse me, is the call to action. And not just making sure that it's obvious and visible, but are the visitors confident that they're taking the right action? So when you combine those three, I challenge you to look at any successful A/B test and not see that they fall into one of those three groups. Any one that failed, they're testing something that just isn't as important. It is those three elements that seem to have the maximum impact over and over and over again.
Okay, Bryan, something that I would like to go back to one of your answers. I think the first comment that you did. It was about how to measure, for example, the effect of a campaign on the brand, and you mentioned checking, for example, searches for a specific word. And I think it links back, for example, to using tools like Insights for Search or Google Trends and things like that. So I'm a big fan of competitive analysis, and I got into the field through Hitwise. It was my first job, and I absolutely love it. And
absolutely.
One of the things that I believe to be a really good optimization technique is, for example, to understand who is your persona, what you said about what is the age of the person or the all kinds of demographics, and then to look into, for example, Compete or Quantcast free tools, and to see which websites are the best ones for these people, and then to copy from these websites. So that's one way to test. And one of the things you do every year, I think, is to release a top. In the beginning, it was top 5 and then top 10. Now it's a top 1,000 free tools to use for optimization. So, which tools do you think are helpful for optimizers?
So yeah, I mean, I think the first year I published the list, there were 33 free tools on the list. The following year it was 69. The following year it was 99. And this past year I was going to republish it, and I was over 120 tools at the point. And my brother and I said, okay, this is just not going to work. It was too hard to keep maintaining that list. And also that page was taking forever to load. So I said, okay, I have to rethink how I do this. And it's also a testament to our industry, right? When I first started in this industry, I literally was using Excel spreadsheets to look through log files. So we've come a long way from an optimizer's point of view with a bunch of tools in our toolkit to help us get our job done. So what I did this past year is I launched a website completely separate, run by WordPress, so every entry is in there separately. I'm trying to get people to put some reviews in there and trying to find some videos, some tips on how I use some of the tools. And I launched it at websitetestingtools.com. And I don't know how many tools are in there currently, but I know the number is probably close to about 170 of them. And they're broken out by different categories. So if you look at competitive intelligence, there's a bunch of tools there. If you look at copywriting tools or usability tools or call tracking tools, whatever it is, they're all in there. By the way, that's probably my single most category that I think most people don't do enough of is call tracking.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just don't think it's possible. There's that barrier there.
Yep. And there are a lot of great companies that have developed these call tracking tools that integrate directly with Google Analytics, with some of the other analytics tools like the Mongoose Metrics and If by Phones, and there's a bunch of others. So much of our efforts online are not getting the right credit because we're not tying in the data to the telephone call center. And more than that is, we actually did this because a client of ours built a tracking system years ago, well ahead of the curve before any of the commercial products were out there. And he was able to tie one keyword that never converted online, or practically never converted online, to just one of the largest terms that were call volume. And in the traditional sense, most people would say, oh, well, that keyword wasn't valuable to them. They were just spending money on it for nothing. But as soon as he looked at the call center data, he realized that was an invaluable keyword because it resulted in a lot of sales. And so I don't think enough marketers, especially if you're investing in pay-per-click, whether you're a small retailer or a large retailer or a lead gen site, even more so importantly, if you're not tying in those individual keywords back to a unique phone number so you can tie it back into your analytics, you are definitely missing out on such a huge chunk of data. I mean, you might as well be flying a plane with one wing.
As long as it's not my plane home. So I know Jules, we want to make sure we get Jules. He's been sitting there right in the middle there. I see you waiting patiently. You had a couple of questions, and I thought the one that was interesting was it's actually about testing related to not commerce, not anything we've talked about. It's service.
Yeah, I've been working for like a big bank here in the Netherlands on the service, customer service part, and you have if you want to measure KPIs there, they're entirely different beasts. There are engagement or CPC. It's totally irrelevant.
Yep.
So if you want to optimize for customer service, what do you think are the main challenges there?
So you know what, it's one of those that comes right back to the call tracking. So I think it's a great question as a follow-up. You know, one of your goals should be to minimize the number of calls that go into the help center, right? And so one of the things I would certainly be doing is I'd have different sections of your help center with different phone numbers, right? So if people do have problems, they can call in, but you can track from where the calls are actually coming from, what are the topics that seem to be triggering the calls, and your goal should be to optimize every single month to reduce those number of calls coming in. Right? The bigger the more frequent the problem comes up, the more you have to do to find ways to solve it online to reduce your overall cost infrastructure. Right? That's the nature of a service business. Right? And helping them accomplish the task they came to the website to do.
Yeah, I agree.
Are they doing that is the question.
Well, for large corporations, it's oftentimes difficult to like change telephone numbers. They like to have one telephone number. So I think it's I can imagine some kind of tools like real-time the Woopra web analytics product, which is really real-time. You can actually follow people, map people on your site. There's a lot of people visiting this part of my website, and now they're calling. Or you can ask your telephone operators to ask the people, were you just visiting our site, and then have them write it down. That's oftentimes.
There are certainly some solutions that also can help tie in that visitor as well. You can also use different parts of your IVR system to have people dial in and give them different extensions based on where they are. That's another way to do it, even if they want to use one phone number. So there are ways to be able to do this.
So Jules, I think you just brought up a really interesting point. Friction, right? So friction within the organization. And, I know you actually had a question about that. And Bryan, I think you wrote about, I can't remember if it was on your blog or if it was on ClickZ, within the last couple of months about organizations and building teams for analytics. And I remember reading that and I was like, oh my God, it's like this is exactly the blueprint that you need to follow.
Yep, yeah. No, I think it was funny because I don't know if you want me to name names, but someone who most people have seen in this industry. He's very senior for one of the vendors, and I were having this conversation. And one of the controversial pieces there is I say, you do not want a analyst as your head of optimization. Because their focus should be analysis. Their focus shouldn't necessarily be on execution and on the marketing and branding side, right? So that they should have strong competence in understanding what happens from the data, but you don't want them as an analyst, right? That really should be someone else's role. Their job is much more project management, advocacy, right? Just getting things done through the organization to impact change. Because really, like, it comes back to what I said earlier, right? The goal of analytics is to make business changes, right? To make things actually have an impact to the business. And so you need someone who's a master at that to lead your efforts, or else you're just not going to get the results that you ultimately want.
And how would you balance that between internal and maybe external vendors?
Yeah, so, what we've seen is, oftentimes when someone hires an external vendor to help them with their conversion optimization, they think of the process, as a project, not as an ongoing process. And so this needs to be owned internally. This is all part. It's all the same things. I tell people I learned more about optimization, losing 100 pounds over the last few years, in all the years I worked with clients, because it's that same level of commitment, right? A lot of people they'll go to, the gym a few times, they'll try a new diet, and when it fails, they'll blame the diet, as opposed to saying, oh, no, you know what, I didn't really internalize it myself and put the priority on myself and my organization and the commitment to say, look, we're going to have somebody here whose job it is to constantly make change, to push against the status quo, to help us grow, and sometimes fail. And you have to be willing to have that risk adversity to become successful. It's those that challenge the status quo who have long-term growth success. And if you look, there's a great study by the Harvard Business Review even about 3 months ago that showed, the companies who've had longevity, the GEs of the world and stuff like that, it's because they're constantly questioning the status quo. There's constantly people in there saying, hey, you know what, this doesn't work. And so I think it's a big cultural shift from most organizations to say, look, I'm going to be responsible for optimization. I'm not going to hire somebody. It's got to be internal. Can I have someone help us set up tests? Yes. Can I have someone, develop creative? Yes. Can I have someone even analyze the data? Sure, you can do that. But the person in charge in the organization needs to be able to interface with all the different teams and external vendors. And so I think that's the number one most important issue above everything else that you spend. And it sort of comes back to the same principle, that Avinash has spoken about, that Eric has spoken about. It's people first, right? It's not the tools. Writing $1 million check for an analytics tool is never going to bring you as much success as spending $1 million on people. I'd rather spend more on getting a handful of people and just pumping out different creative ideas and using Google Website Optimizer without all the analytics in the world, just Google Website Optimizer, and I'll generate more revenue for any business than a team that has 50 analysts, right? Because it's not about analyzing data; it's about doing things.
Bryan, just I believe we have another few minutes, and I saw you speaking a few times, and one of the presentations that I really liked is the 21 secrets. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can share with us one of the secrets so that we can end up with something actionable to.
So I'll do more than that. If you give me a second, let me just pop up a browser.
You'll share all of them.
Maybe this URL is still working. I'm just going to check. I might be able to share it with everybody if this works. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give everybody a URL, but I will give you one secret at the end of it. The URL is mo.am. So M is in Mary, O is in octopus, dot, A as in Africa, M as in Mary, /2 secrets, and I'll take you to a landing page. And if you click on my face with word play on it, you'll get to see a whole webinar presentation of the 21 secrets. But that's cool. Another 45 minutes. So I'll give you all 21. And that's me doing it on market motive. But I think my most important secret comes back to my last secret, number 21, which is, why is it that Amazon captures about 30% of every dollar of U.S. e-commerce? And I think I mean, we know that, on average, on any single day, they can have anywhere near 200 tests running on their website. Phenomenal. They were the first to get involved in social commerce. They're always experimenting with things today. By the way, I caught a test last week where they're actually testing a call to action to call them based on what you're doing on your website. And I won't let it out yet because I'm actually doing it for a webinar for Market Motive next week, so I'm not going to share what I caught, but it's really cool. But I think one of the best examples of why Amazon is so successful, and it comes back to everything we're talking about today, action, is that 2 hours after Michael Jackson passed away, they had completely reconfigured their MP3 store. Now, I don't care if you're Walmart, if you're Best Buy, if you're any other organization in the world, Virgin, how long would it take you to change your store based on a real-time event? Probably days. And the advantage that Amazon has is most companies can't call a meeting in 2 hours, but Amazon can change a whole part of their store in less than 2 hours. How much revenue did they capture because of that one-time, real-time event? And they do this day in, day out. And it's that level of execution, of that responsiveness, of that agility, that generates them all the revenue that they get today. And organizations that don't learn how to do that, whether you're big or small, it doesn't matter. That should be your advantage. Small companies don't have all that bureaucracy to slow them down. They need to be more agile than the larger ones. That's how they capture the sales. They need to be reacting to stuff that's happening right now and leverage it.
And Bryan, before Justin closes up the Hangout.
and he gets thrown out of the room, yes.
Yeah, so can you share with us where you're speaking, where people can buy your books, where you blog, and where are you? So,
you can find everything at bryaneisenberg.com. That's fairly easy, and you can always Google me. I'm definitely on Twitter at The Grok. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Google+. My next event, I'm speaking actually tomorrow here in my new hometown of Austin, Texas, at the WA Symposium. I'll actually be sharing my Confessions of a Conversion Rate Optimizer. Some of the lessons I've learned over almost 15 years of doing this stuff. So very excited about that one. And then later on in the month, I'll be up in Canada, and then back to New York, my former hometown, in March for Search Engine Strategies.
Cool.
This was awesome. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna run and work harder. Like, this is really this was fantastic, Bryan. I think we have to obviously thank you, but all of you guys that are sitting here that asked these questions, I think they were just kind of spot on in terms of real life challenges that we're facing, and to hear your advice and how to get through these things, kind of both at a tactical and a strategic level, it's really motivational.
Well, thank you again for having me, and thank you everybody for the questions. I think as an industry, and one of the reasons we started the Web Analytics Association with Jim Stern and Andrew Edwards several years ago, was we need to educate everybody. We need to get out there and help people accomplish these tasks. And it's not an easy thing to do. This is probably one of the hardest things any business have had to do, how to adjust to it. And technology, as we see, changes every single day, and it changes the whole nature of what's going on. And it's changing the way people look to buy and and how they buy. Just think about the impact that the iPhone has had on all of retail, right? Or the iPad. And when you just start thinking, what's going to be in our kids' generation, we are setting the path for that future. And it's all our efforts, and it's all of our responsibilities to go out there and educate, the CMOs and the VPs that are out there that don't know it today, that are living still in the old reality. So we've got a big task ahead of all of us. So thank you for hosting, and I look forward to seeing more of these in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Daniel and I will do some production, and we'll probably post a summary and some videos. So thanks again. Have a great day or evening. I'm noticing we have people from all over the world, which is kind of exciting. So
that's awesome.
Take care, everybody. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.